Hi, welcome back to another session on the Best Year of Your Life Summit. My name is Fleet Mall, your co-host for this session, and I'm really happy to be here with Stefan Falk. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Well, thank you. We're thrilled to have you be part of our summit and to speak with you on this day focused on mindset and performance. So first of all, I'm going to give our audience a little bit of your background so they'll be more than aware why we're speaking with you on this day focused on mindset and performance. Then we'll jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
Great. So human performance executive coach and internationally recognized leadership expert, Stefan Falk has worked with, counseled, and trained over 4,000 leaders across more than 60 different client organizations in North America and Europe. As a C-suite leader, he is responsible for driving corporate transformation and has worked with prominent institutions, including the U.S. Navy SEALs and McKinsey & Company, one of the more renowned consulting companies in the world. Stefan Falk's work has gained international recognition, being featured in publications like Fast Company, as well as books as the New York Times bestseller Drive, The Supporting Truth About What Motivates Us, the Oxford Handbook of Positive Psychology, and The Science of the Tao. Stefan Falk has authored his first book with neuroscientist Katerina Gospic on neuroleadership, entitled Neuroleadership, Effective Leadership Based on Neuroscience and Proven Methods. So again, welcome to the best year of your life, and thank you so much for being part of this. Today we are focused on mindset and performance, and really performance in any area of our life. You have a lot of background training leaders, but mindset affects our performance in our personal lives, our relationship lives, in whatever pursuits that are important to us in life. And so I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you. Maybe you could start by just giving us a little bit of your background and how you became an executive coach focused on training leaders to enhance their quality of life and performance.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it all started, very early when I was a kid. For reasons I still don't understand. My mother rented me a piano when I turned 8 years old. And very soon, playing the piano almost became an obsession. It was a type of experience I've never experienced before. It was so extraordinarily fulfilling being in that space. And I had this passion. I really wanted to become good at playing. And I became good playing the piano, very soon into the process because it was such an obsession. And I started to compose my own songs maybe when I was 9.5 or 10 years old. And then I was recognized at school. We had this music hour, every week. And then, I just happened to play, one of them. And then I was invited to play for, other students, at graduation, older students, and, all over the place. And started to play with older kids, in the bands and so forth. What happened was that it basically just overtook my life, playing the piano. So my grades at school went down the drain from a situation where they were actually pretty good. And then when I turned, I think it was 12 or 13, I was not in a good situation at school. My music was fantastic and super fulfilling, but in a rare moment, a very, very rare moment of brilliance, I was thinking about, myself and my future, and okay, so what's going to happen? Okay, my grades at school are super bad, and it's basically going to cap my ability to, for opportunities, academically. Okay, that's based because everything was merit based. In Sweden, you had to have certain grades, to be allowed, to certain educations. And the sort of going for a career as a professional musician, I could go for that. But way back then, we had 5 record companies, you could not self-publish music. It was a really, really, a competitive area. So then, and this is the rare moment of brilliance, one of the few in my life, I basically asked myself, what if I could figure out what makes piano so extraordinarily exciting and fulfilling? and apply that to other parts of my life, like school, for instance. Okay, so I started to think deeply about that, and I arrived at, and that's what I talk about in my new book, Intrinsic Motivation. What I call the 5 cognitive elements, of intrinsic motivation. That if you apply those to any type of activity, you can actually make that activity lovable. And that's basically what set me off, figuring out, because when I identified those cognitive elements, I applied them at school. And not only did I make school, much more exciting, I actually became really successful at school. Okay. And basically then I ended up in a situation where I was applying for college. I had unlimited opportunities, for what I could apply for. And those 5 cognitive elements have, served me well. When from university, I was recruited into the advertising industry as a copywriter, okay? And then I started to be interested in, doing art direction, okay? It helped me very quickly to accelerate into that. I ended up actually, which is, you cannot believe now when you look at me, but my last job in the communications industry, so to speak, was actually as a creative director for a fashion magazine, okay? Before I was then recruited to McKinsey. So I think that, for me, the discovery of those cognitive elements basically has shaped my whole life. And then early on in my career, even before I do what I do today, I started to interest myself in sort of helping others to also master their minds, okay? Because that's what life is about, mastering your mind, and also understanding that your mind has a pre-configuration. And your mind is not you, okay? You're something else. And you need to understand how your mind operates in order to actually manage it well.
Well, it's fascinating. And I love that you're speaking about intrinsic motivation, because I think, here we are in this summit with tens of thousands of people, with some longing, some aspiration to not give up on their dreams, to move forward in their lives, to up-level various domains of their life, and to kick off this new year in the best way possible. And often we struggle with finding that motivation, and we think maybe we have to find it outside of ourselves somewhere. And the key is really always inside of us. I wonder if you could speak about those 5 cognitive elements of this model of intrinsic motivation.
The first one that I found was that I always envisioned, like a beautiful end product of what I was doing. Whether I was practicing the piano or playing for an audience, I always had this like vision of what I wanted to create. If I played for people, I envisioned the reaction I wanted to get, the facial expressions when I played, and so forth. I always also, the second one, wanted to compete with myself. I wanted to do something better this time, okay? So I was always thinking about, okay, when I practiced the last time, okay, what was difficult for me, okay, how can I sort of address this now, okay, and so forth. And then, given that, and also the third thing, I was always very mindful about the emotional experience I wanted to have while performing or while practicing. So if I was walking home from school and I was feeling pretty mellow, okay, I would almost automatically ask myself, is this, my feeling, is this something I want to manifest when I perform, or if it's something I want to tweak and change, whatever, okay? So it was like emotional regulation in that too. And then fourthly, given the 3 first ones, I could constantly track my performance because I had a vision for what I wanted to create and how I wanted to feel and so forth. And that means that in the moment, I could see, how I was doing. And then given that, I could also, change how I was doing in order to come closer to my desired end product in terms of feelings and whatever. And then fifth, and this is a really something that grown-ups seldom practice. I engaged with other kids, playing music, to be inspired by them and also inspire them. Okay, that was a major source of inspiration and excitement. And these 5 cognitive elements you can apply, in in your world, you can even make it simpler. You can basically think about what I talk about in the book. It's like, think about an exciting outcome of a task. It could be the most boring task you have, but how can you make that exciting? And one of the biggest aphrodisiac, I think, for people, because we are fundamentally born, social, is to think about the value you bring to someone else with doing this, okay? Because in an organization, if we talk about the professional world, everything that is performed in an organization, my tasks, the purpose of them is to enable someone else to do something else. And what if I can perform this thing that makes it so valuable for the other person and enables his or her to do something special with it? That's the simplest way to make something that is boring, scary, or difficult, or whatever, pretty exciting to think about. And the thing, when you think about an exciting outcome, something that really, intrigues you, makes you, I really would like to do that, it automatically pushes you into the how. How do I do that? So that means that you actually think about some kind of plan. It might not be that you use paper and pen to think about it, but in your mind you have a vision, for how to pursue that. And when you have a plan, you will perform better than when you don't have a plan, okay? Which makes the experience of performing much more enjoyable, yes, when we perform better. And when we have performed better and enjoy the experience, we like to think about it afterwards, which of course deepens our learning about the activity and ourselves. So it becomes sort of a very virtuous cycle, this thing.
Mm. Well, this ties into so many through lines in our summit, Stefan, and it's really the kind of the rubber meets the road. Mm-hmm. I really just hear you talking about taking ownership for our own mind and modeling that such that we can accomplish what we want to accomplish. So it's really great stuff. And I know you also talk about your work in terms of neuro leadership, and that's another major through line of this summit. Is really we focus a lot on current neuroscientific evidence and employing that to enhance our well-being and to enhance our performance in life, and to really understand how to work with our mind, how to work with the brain, literally rewire the brain to be able to kind of move in the direction we'd actually like to move into in life. And I love where you also you captured about how do we ground that in a real vision for the result that we're hoping to achieve. And along the way, you found ways also to build in connecting with that joy and inspiration all the way through, both in terms of the emotional experience of whoever we're performing this task for in relationship to, as well as doing it in community with others and so forth. So it's such a beautiful model. I wonder if you could talk a little further about this idea of neuro leadership and how that might apply to our lives, because I know you work with a lot of leaders, but we all need to be leaders for ourselves to begin with, to be in a position of self-leadership if we're going to direct our lives in a way we'd like to go.
Yeah, I think, if we start with the question, why neuroscience, why behavior science, and so forth. I think it's so obvious why you need to learn about those things and use those as sources for insight into yourself, because it's almost like, okay, let's say you're a leader and you're going to lead people. Not learning a little bit around, from neuroscience, from behavior science, psychology, even psychiatry, and so forth. It's almost like saying, okay, I want to work in finance. Okay, what do you know about finance? I know nothing. Well, that's not a good idea. Okay, so you need to learn something about that. Now, I've been into neuroscience and behavior science, I think, since 1997. That's when I realized that that's probably a good path to be a little bit more insightful around those things if I have an aspiration to become a leader, for instance. That was basically the main thought I had. And if I summarize, and of course there's a gazillion, insights that's relevant, which also makes it hard for me to be super distinctive when I talk about it. But if I summarize, what I think, at least on an overall level, what everyone should understand is that we are born with a pre-configured mind. Okay, that is the result of evolution. And the purpose of a pre-configured mind is basically to, keep us alive, keep us safe and keep us alive. That's the purpose of the pre-configured mind, and that's how it operates. And the mind basically has three priorities. Of two are super strong. It's almost like these are such a strong priorities of the mind that it kills the third little one. And the pre-configured mind, I love his book, Michael Singer's book, The Unfeathered Soul, because he talks about the inner voice. And that's exactly, anyone that has tried meditation and just focusing on the breath, okay, they have met their inner voice, their pre-configured mind, up close and personal. Because all of a sudden when you lie there, okay, it's like you get all these thoughts in your head, okay, and you don't know where they're coming from, okay, and you think about what you ate yesterday, you think about something happening tomorrow that is uncomfortable, whatever, okay. So it's always there, and it derails us. If you're not conscious about it, it will derail us, okay. So this inner voice, this like pre-configured mind, had three priorities, of which two are super strong. The first one is to always conserve energy. And that's a result of evolution, okay? Because we have lived in a situation where, all the necessities, foods and all these things and the threats were imminent. We didn't know when we were going to eat, okay? So always have a surplus of energy was a key survival strategy. That's the main priority. And that force, that priority, risk pushing us into really bad situations, okay? For everything from blaming others for our failures to not biting the bullet when we should bite the bullet, even though whatever. The second priority is making us super risk averse, okay? We don't take risk. Any type of uncertainty, we do nothing, okay? That's it. So for instance, in a task, if it's not a clear outcome with the task, we might not pursue the task for us, okay? Whatever. We ask them for purpose. We ask someone else to tell us about that. And the third little priority that the pre-configured mind has is to learn new things. But that is almost killed by the other two priorities, okay? And what this means, this saving energy, for instance, for the individual and the mindset, is that if you live in an organization where it's not a requirement to actually develop yourself every day, to rethink your tasks, to find new ways to perform old tasks and also pursue new tasks and learn new things. As soon as you feel psychologically that you have learned something and you know how to do it, you will log out and you will start to perform that tasks on habit, okay? Now, research shows that when you perform the same task over and over again in the same way, performance don't go up, okay? What happens is that your level of effort goes down over time, okay? And when your level of effort goes down, you start to feel boredom, okay, in it. So, and it's very important to understand this, like priorities of the pre-configured mind. And then also number two, understand that you actually can rewire your mind, okay, to create a better balance between those priorities, to be much more mindful in how you do things. And on the theme of mindset and its importance, I think we intuitively understand that the way I allow myself to think about myself activates my subconsciousness, and my subconsciousness works 24/7. And the purpose of my subconsciousness is to work toward my goals and make decisions based on my mindset and my aspirations. So you should be very mindful about that. But recent research on the mindset also shows that not only does it affect your decision making and how you orientate yourself in life, it actually also affects your bodily functions. They did this experiment with, I think it was hotel maids here in the US. They went to a hotel because being a hotel maid is a pretty sort of it's a job with lots of physical exercise. You make beds and you clean rooms and you do a lot of things. You move around. So they went to this hotel, and I think they selected it was 80 hotel maids. And what they did is that they measured their body fat, their blood pressure, and a few things up front. And then they separated them into two groups. So 40 of them just continued doing whatever they were doing. And the other group, they spent like a couple of hours with the researchers, maybe only 1 hour. And the only thing they got a one-pager describing how much calories you burn, when you perform your different tasks. How much calories do you burn when you make a bed and so forth, vacuuming. And then they left them, they went back to work, and then they came back a couple of weeks later. And then they measured again the blood pressure, the body fat, and all these things, the weight. Okay. And the group that got the information, they had improved their blood pressure, they had improved their body fat, they had improved their weight, lost weight. Okay. The other group was not changed. Okay. So it's actually the mindset affects everything in your life, not only your decisions and whatever. It also affects your bodily functions.
So, this touches in on some of the things we looked at in the science of habit change, that the mind is always optimizing to conserve energy. Mm-hmm. And it's always going to be looking for the easiest way. Mm-hmm. And so to work with that, when we're trying to change habits, we need to set ourselves up for success. If we create a very complex pathway to establishing a new habit, it's not likely to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And you also touched on meditation and mind training, which are really clear through lines for this summit. So it's just great to be tying in a lot of these strands and really understanding the basics of what it takes to take ownership for how this mind of ours operates, and realizing that it's not actually who we are, but it does really influence how we show up in the world. So I wonder, let's talk about leadership for just a moment. So how would you describe, what are some of the qualities that make an effective leader? And are leaders born leaders, or is this something we train ourselves to do, or both? And how would you describe an effective leader?
Well, no. Up front, I have to say that I don't believe in talent. Okay, I don't believe in it whatsoever. I think I am actually living proof of that myself. I'm a person of pretty average intelligence, and I've been doing some pretty magnificent things, and that has to do with how I manage myself, basically. So I don't believe in that. Now, in terms of effective leadership, I start from the end point, with the end in mind. So I think about, okay, what is the fundamental purpose of leadership? Okay. If you're in an organization, that you have what I say two main purposes. One purpose is to always safeguard the best interest of the organization, okay? And that's beyond your specific area, okay? That's like that. And it's not the best interest of the CEO or the board or anything. It's about the organization, okay? How to make this a stronger, better place, to be, okay? That's one of the things. And that's the lens you should use when you look at yourself, okay? How you spend your day, how you behave, how you prioritize, what you achieve and so forth. That's also the lens you should use when you look at your peers, okay? And that's the lens you should use when you look at your direct reports, okay, your people. And that's the lens you should use also when you look at your boss, okay? And I found that there's something that I teach almost all my clients, okay? And it just makes leadership in terms of making judgments, making decisions, engaging in courageous conversations. So simple, because this is not about what I believe. This is not about my needs. This is actually about safeguarding something that's much bigger than us, okay? So that I think that makes like strong leadership, pretty, not easy, but at least easier, okay? The second part, and this is the tricky part, and this is what most leaders struggle with most, is that the prime responsibility of a leader is not very dissimilar from the prime responsibility of good parenting, which is basically then to make sure that your people as leaders, they grow and develop into, strong, almost like self-sufficient individuals, okay, that actually can perform and thrive without you, okay? You should not be needed, okay, in this sense. So that's what I find, that are the two most important things. And then in terms of, being a good parent, you have this classical question about, micromanaging or giving freedom and all these things, okay? And most leaders are one-trick ponies. They have one way of leading, and they apply that all the time. So some leaders give total freedom when they shouldn't, okay? And some leaders are micromanaging when they shouldn't, okay? Now, it's pretty simple, so if you and I have a dialogue and, I'm your direct report and I'm working with something, okay? It's very simple, how to decide how to deal with that situation. First, you ask yourself, okay, given what Stefan needs to achieve or tries to achieve or whatever it is, reach any goal, does he seem to know what he's talking about? Okay? Yeah, he's fairly knowledgeable about what it takes to do it and all these things. Okay, good, okay. Does he have a believable plan in place for actually achieving that? Okay. Yes or no? Okay. Now, do I see any effort in actually executing on that plan? Do I see any progress on that plan? Okay. Yes or no? And lastly, does he involve me, timely in the stuff that he's struggling with? Okay. To seek my advice. Now, if the answer is no to any of these questions, obviously, I'm going to engage, okay? And that could then look as micromanaging, okay? Understand? So, I don't know if that's an answer to the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the broad perspective you began with, which kind of gives this North Star of the overall well-being of the organization as a whole, which I would assume also includes, whether this is a for-profit business, a nonprofit, a school, whatever it might be. It includes its customers and clients. It includes its vendors, and it's a systemic approach, right? The overall well-being expands you into a very broad systemic approach, and then coming back into maybe some of the mechanisms of leadership. I like that very clear direction around it's not either being a micromanager or not being a micromanager. It's providing the appropriate level of guidance and management for the situation. And you laid that out very clearly. Leaders, their job may be to hold space, to coach, to inspire, but they do end up making decisions. And we all make decisions in our lives. We're responsible to make lots of decisions in our own daily lives. So I wonder if you could say something about sort of setting ourselves up to have a better batting average with the decisions we make.
Yeah, I think that okay. So there's so much to talk about when it comes to decisions, because it's basically making judgments, and making the assessment of a situation. What's the right path to go here? I find in general that okay, so you have decision making, and then you have execution of decisions. Okay, basically, I find that even the bigger problem is execution. There's so many decisions taken that are never executed. Okay, it's like this knowing and doing gap that we have. But there is also a lot of bad decisions taken in organizations, and it's very seldom that a leader asks him or herself that this simple question. Okay, I have this situation. I'm going to make this decision. Can I run with my low resolution view of this? Okay, which is basically based on my previous experience and whatever little I know about the situation. Or do I need a high resolution? Okay, do I need to know more about the problem? Because a decision is always geared towards solving some kind of problem. Okay. And I find that if you look at, for instance, problem solving, or decision making, which I think is basically the same thing. There are 5 logical questions that you should always ask yourself. So what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And you should express that as, a question, how do I go from A to B? Okay? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, you should ask yourself, how big is the problem? Okay? Which means, okay, what's the value of solving it? Or what's the cost of having this problem existing? Okay? That question, almost no leader asks themselves, and I worked with thousands of them, okay? In one of the organizations where I was an executive, we actually printed sweatshirts to leaders, saying to them, on the sweatshirt said, a leader's best friend, how big is the problem? ? Okay? Because if you think about it, if you don't quantify a problem and really understand its significance in that aspect, how on earth are you going to prioritize, between different problems if you don't really know how big they are and how complex they are? Number 2, how on earth do you know how much you can spend on solving a problem if you don't know how big it is? Do you want to throw like $10 million after something that causes you $500,000, in cost? No, you don't want to do that, okay? So, and then in terms of innovation, if a problem is big enough, but the problem is uncomfortable to talk about and think about, it is much harder to avoid it, okay? And here you mentioned that, a while back, people, making promises or setting them up, and then they are actually not, successful pursuing the goals they have. One of the main reasons they are not successful is that they avoid everything that is, or anything that is uncomfortable on the path to the goal, okay? That's the risk averseness of the mind, okay, and also saving energy, okay. We want to take the easy way out, okay. And any goal, even the nicest, most comfy goal, will, at the end of the day, you will face situations that are uncomfortable for you, okay. Uncomfortable comes in many different shapes and forms. One is that, the boredom you get from repeating the same activity that you need to repeat, several times, reaching the goal. Okay, that's one type of boredom. Okay, and then you tend to not, go all in when you perform it if you don't rethink how to perform it. But then there are other things that are uncomfortable. For instance, in an organizational setting, other people. I think that in organizations, one of the sources of the most discomfort people have are other people that are actually just like themselves, okay, but just hard to deal with, okay. I have gazillion stories around that. So back to it. So then, the second question, which probably is the most important question, is how big is the problem, in order to get a view on that. The third question is, of course, why does this problem exist? What are the true root causes for that? Mm-hmm. And then comes the fourth question is, okay, what alternative solutions exist to solving this problem, including doing nothing? Okay. And then the fifth question is, what is the best solution? Now, when I ask leaders to talk me through a problem, okay, they have, I listen to them, and it's almost I have these 5 questions in my head programmed as buckets, okay? So I just sort everything they say in the different buckets, okay? So when I then look at my buckets after they have talked about the problem, I basically see nothing in the bucket, how big is the problem? I see absolutely nothing in terms of alternative solutions. I see a few things in the root causes, okay? But then when I go to the first bucket and say, what is the problem? It's really not clear what the problem is. And then I see a gazillion things in the bucket, what's the best solution and how to pursue that. Which means that, very often in an organization, someone has a solution, but it's not sure what type of problem it's actually a solution for. That's it. So getting straight of this, I think is the key for good decision making.
Well, I love the clarity of this very structured approach you're taking, because we all are up against our conditioned mind. I think you called it the pre-configured mind, right? Yeah, mm-hmm. Our conditioned mind. And we're up against what psychologists call the negativity bias, because job one for any species is survival. So We've evolved to spin things to the negative, to focus on threat. And we also are by nature kind of comfort-seeking animals, so we tend to avoid discomfort. So we're up against all those things. And if we don't take a structured approach and with some clarity, those things are just going to continually undermine us again and again and again. So I wonder if you could speak. I love the initial framework you came up with for that you use for intrinsic motivation, and that kind of addresses what I'm about to ask you again. But we do run up against these obstacles, and we do find ourselves. Sometimes we feel we're making progress. It's maybe when we're doing well, it's 2 steps forward and only 1 step back. But then sometimes it feels like it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And we find ourselves getting undermined and off track with things. And, we know a lot about, how our much more about the brain today, and that there are neural pathways associated with our various habits and behaviors. And when we get those, in a positive sense, we talk about grooving behaviors. We're in the groove and we've grooved our golf swing or whatever it is, but we can also get stuck in ruts, right? And those are literally like ruts in the brain. And so when we find ourselves up against these obstacles and getting knocked off track and losing our inspiration, losing our motivation, thinking, well, I could, I really want to accomplish that, but then we hit the discomfort, we hit the challenges, we start to lose faith in ourselves. I'm wondering if you could talk maybe some specific instances of how you've helped people kind of overcome some of these obstacles and get back on track with what they really would like to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I have a sort of a gazillion sort of stories and examples from my own life and from my clients. And what makes it a little bit tricky is that I'm so primed into, working with individuals and even though there are some, commonalities across the individuals, they have sort of a little bit of a unique starting point. But it's very important that you create some kind of, infrastructure around you, and that's basically, in your own mind. Okay. I think, certain life principles that really serves you well, every day, for instance. Okay. And then we can talk about method, how you approach, different, situations and tasks and whatever. But, one life principle is basically don't ever participate in negative talk, okay? Because negative talk is nothing else than brain pollution, okay? So if someone at work wants to talk, and say less good things about the person that is not present, you basically say, no, okay. If you have an issue with that person, okay, why don't you go and solve it? Okay, I'm not going to do that. And that's the same thing, not allowing negative thoughts, If, for instance, management or whoever in your life makes a decision that affects you, okay, we have a tendency by default to dislike that because we were not part of it, okay? So taking a step back and really trying to think about, what's my reaction now? Why do I need to, react? Okay, so one thing is like completely define negativity. Okay, that's it. And because if you do that, and if you practice that, your brain is going to start to generate a red alert. Oh, now I'm getting carried away by negativity. Okay, my brain is built like that. I cannot take negativity. It's just like it's almost like I go to the mirror and say, okay, Stefan, your primitive mind now is trying to take over. You're trying to be negative. Stop it, because you're not going to lead you anywhere good. Okay, so I have a gazillion red alerts in my mind. Okay, when I feel that I'm losing the battle from my pre-configured mind. Okay. A second life principle that is very important is to keep all deadlines and promises with no exception and with no excuses, okay? When I was an executive, this was one of the behavioral principles I had throughout the organization. And I promise you, this is 70% of a high-performing organization. if people really, keep their promises, what they say they're going to do, and they do it, and keep all the deadlines they deliver on time, you have elevated each individual and the organization to an extraordinary level. Because today, in most organizations, it's perfectly okay not to deliver, because nobody is delivering. So it disappears, your behavior disappears in the thing. So the principle here, I think, that is very useful. And I tell my clients that all the time when they want to do something that is bigger than just here and now. Ask yourself now if you're really going to do it. Okay? Don't say you're going to do something that you don't do. Because if you really want to go down the path to create some kind of, almost like lurking on the surface, like, I'm not okay, I'm not a good person, I don't feel good about myself, is to constantly say you're going to do a lot of things that you're not going to do. Okay? So never do that. Okay? I live by that principle. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So for instance, sitting here with you, ever since I was a kid, except when I was playing the piano, I would say, I hate to be in the spotlight. It's the worst thing, okay? I don't want to be in the spotlight. So doing these interviews, especially when I'm talking about something that I'm extremely knowledgeable about and experienced about, I'm at my worst. If you come to me with a concrete client problem, okay, I'm at my best because I can apply all my knowledge to it. Okay, we can go deep on it. But this situation has a combination of things that I basically just want to flee from. Okay, but I decided I'm going to do it. Okay, that's it, and that's also the only way to get better at it. Whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So there's a few sort of life principles that you should have, and you should live by those every day. And what you can do simply is to do some daily journaling around them. Okay, how have I been today in terms of allowing negative thoughts, and participating in negative talk? Okay, in what situations? Why? Okay, what can I do differently? Spending 10 minutes, reflecting on these things every day is a very, very smart, easy way for you to start to rewire your brain and create new synapses in your brain. Okay. So back then to, the more active method, more proactive method. Well, if I work with clients that have a, pretty poor starting point, simple things like promising yourself to every day share with your loved ones something exciting that happened at work, something that was really interesting, exciting, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a really smart way to start the process, okay? Because then you really need to, use some cognitive power to think about your day, okay, and what was really exciting. And when you start to think about it in retrospect, you automatically start to think about it before it happens, okay? So while brushing your teeth, before going to bed, you can think through your day and think about, tomorrow I'm going to meet Fleet. We're going to have this working meeting. Okay, that's going to be exciting. I think I want to ask him this question because that's a really interesting question. All of a sudden, you start this positive process. And then, of course, you can be much more methodological about it. You can, for instance, you look in your calendar, you might have like 8 things in your calendar, you have 4 meetings, you have some other stuff in it, okay? Start to define some exciting outcomes, let's say for half of those. Thinking about, I'm having this meeting, what would be an exciting outcome in that? Is it, the reaction I want to get from, what I bring to the table? Is it something else that I want to do? Okay, how can I go about doing that, and so forth? And then you evaluate those. This is what in the book I call daily goals, basically. And the daily goals, methodology, which is basically thinking about an exciting outcome and a plan for achieve it. You can use that in all situations. So when you're down and out, if you suffer from mild depression or anxiety or whatever it is, okay, you can then moderate how you define the exciting outcomes for tasks and whatever, okay, to fit your mental, state. Like what I said about the 5 cognitive elements, you can decide to do it, okay? You can decide to do it in a certain way. So with this methodology, thinking about your expectations, which is the desired outcomes, and your effort, how to do it, you can do that for scary tasks. difficult tasks, boring tasks, tasks you need to perform better, new tasks you want to perform for the first time, or whatever it is. So it's sort of universally applicable.
Wow, there's so much in there. The person you talked about, just not engaging in negative conversations and negative self-talk, is just so foundational. And the thing is, we're surrounded by negativity, right? There's such a culture of blaming and complaining and negativity. And if we don't really take ownership for directing our own lives and molding our own, rewiring our own brain, molding how our mind operates, it's hard not to be influenced by that. So, and then accountability, keeping our word. I mean, I do similar work to you in a lot of organizations, and so many organizations, they operate under a cloud of unaccountability. Nobody keeps agreements with anybody. Everybody gives a path because it's just like, oh, we're busy, you're busy, I know I'm busy. And it just weighs everything down. And so much in our lives, even in our personal lives, we constantly tell ourselves, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And we're lying to ourselves, maybe with good intention, but we don't follow through on the things. And it's such an energy killer.
You have this, like, you have the external environment, you have the internal environment, which, that's my key focus. Of course, I know a gazillion things about, what to do and what not to do in the external environment too. But I also know that as long as individuals don't really understand that the internal environment, okay, if I don't work to master that, it really doesn't matter, what happens in the external environment, okay? It has limited, positive or negative impact on me. And if there is one mindset that and I'm not completely, 100% like, have not preempted, this thinking, but I think probably the best mindset to cultivate as a professional is as if you were sort of an athlete or an elite athlete, playing in team sports, okay? And the team you're in is basically the organization you're in, okay? Now, and some kind of thing, we want to win the Stanley Cup, whatever, in like in hockey or whatever. So what can you do as an elite? Well, the only thing you can do and you can control is your own development and your own performance, okay? And you're playing with this organization where at least corporate leadership say that they want to be the number one in the business. They want to win and they want to win, okay? That's it. Now, you can only do as much as you can do, and that is to invest in you every day to become stronger and better and more well-being and all these things. That's what you can do. Now, it could happen that you're actually playing with a team that is not doing everything it could do to actually win the Stanley Cup, okay? But you become stronger in the process, and chances are that you will be drafted to another club that is better, to actually, win the Stanley Cup, so to speak. So I find that sort of metaphor for how to think about yourself is pretty valuable. It also opens up for another, way of thinking about things, which is then, practice. And then you have the game situation. So if you want to develop yourself, just say you want to develop your presentation skills or your executive gravitas or problem-solving skills, whatever it is, okay? You can then start to think about your calendar in terms of practice, opportunities, and then real live, games that you actually have, okay? And just makes that, even more, interesting, okay? For instance, so I think there's something in that metaphor that is potentially very relevant, for a professional to think about.
Absolutely. I think for all of us. And again, I just hear this intentionality about really being intentional about our lives and bringing that kind of clarity and that kind of, what is a science-based approach to developing a mindset we need. We're kind of getting towards the end of our time here. You've been speaking quite eloquently to kind of, I think, high-level mindset formation, which is absolutely beautiful. And I think some of us, just to clarify the kind of dichotomies of, where some of us find ourselves getting stuck. I hear you speaking a lot to what could be called a growth mindset, realizing we can continually learn, we can train ourselves, we can train our brain, we can rewire our brain, we can master life and activities, we can train for the game, as you were just mentioning. And that can be contrasted to what some of us ended up with as a human condition, or we were in culturally influenced to have more of a fixed mindset thing. Well, this is just the way I am. Or even worse than that, to get caught in a victim mindset. Now, people are victimized in life, and obviously they need help and support when they are in some way. But what I'm talking about here is we develop that mindset where, things are happening to me. And we feel that sense of powerlessness. So kind of growth mindset versus fixed mindset and victim mindset. And then on the other hand, just that kind of basic dichotomy of being an optimist or a pessimist, but more importantly, I think having just a positive mindset versus a negative mindset. So I wonder if you could just speak to those dichotomies a little bit, just so we get really clear for our audience, because we all can get caught in those things, and it's really not our fault. It's just it's out there in the culture, but it is up to us. We're the only ones that can change it.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, this is such a big topic. An extremely important part of making you much more in charge of yourself, and this is seldom talked about, I think, is to spend sufficient time on having a dialogue with yourself. Okay. It's and being in solitude. I love that, and that comes from. I realized that the piano experience I had was so decisive, for my life. I would not be here sitting with you and talking with you without that experience. It has a clear link, to this, whatever. But there was another thing also when I grew up, and that I had. I was scared stiff by my father, because my father, his idea for parenting was basically spanking. Okay, so whenever I did something that he didn't like, which I think was most of the things I did, he didn't like. Okay, he wanted to spank me. And I was also, when I was very little, pretty overweight. So I was not very popular, among other kids. So I spent a lot of time in my room, alone, playing. Now, that sounds like almost like a sad thing. No, I'm so grateful for that, because playing alone as a kid, I don't have any external inspiration, okay? I basically need to get that inspiration out of myself. I need to have a dialogue with myself. Okay, what am I going to play with now? Okay, why is that going to be fascinating? Now, of course, I didn't use these words back then, but this also, the brain becomes good at what you force it to work on. Okay, so this inner dialogue, having this inner dialogue with myself, made my inner world much stronger. Okay, and when your inner world is much stronger, okay, you actually are in a position where you can decide a little bit how to react to and how to think about the things that happens in the external world. Okay, you develop what I call in the book a detective mindset. Okay, it's interesting. Fleet is really acting in an abusive way toward me now. Okay, yeah, I feel the pain from that, but it's interesting. Why is he doing that? It's like I take a step back, but that in order to do that, you need to develop a brain that sort of facilitates this inner world, this dialogue. And there is no other way that actually carve out time in your schedule to have just be idle, think about what you experience, think about if the way you think about those experiences are reasonable or not, okay? Because I find that fundamentally, and most of the problems we have are related to other people, okay, for whatever reason, okay? And we think so one-dimensionally over these people that, we sort the world in good and bad, those simple, like distinctions. And I find that most people you meet, they actually have fundamentally good intentions. It's just that those intentions are carried out in a not very mindful way, okay? And that could be hurtful. And especially when people feel a little bit threatened, they regress into something that is, can be pretty mean, depending on if you're outward acting or inward acting. You basically take it on yourself. Okay. So I know this is a super lame thing to say, but I just think that it's so important that people carve out time to be in solitude, think about themselves and so forth. So that's one thing. The second thing is to dare to dream crazy, dream crazy. I mean, in my life, that's been one of the key forces for me. I don't, I've done so many things that if I've told someone what I was dreaming about, they would say I'm crazy. You have no starting point doing that. But eventually I did it. And the thing is that you can dream. The dream can be super crazy. You want to become the new Steve Jobs or whatever it is, okay? Or the new Dalai Lama, or whatever you want, whatever you want to dream about. As long as it becomes meaningful and it energizes your present moment. Because one thing is certain: if you dream crazy, and even if the dream is not, you cannot reach a dream, you will end up in crazy good places. Okay, if you would have told me like 7-8 years ago, Stefan, I predict that you will at one point, maybe 3-4 years down from now, you will sit in a room filled with Navy SEAL Team 6 persons, talking about them. Okay, I will probably Fleet, you need to take your medication. Okay, that will never happen. Okay, but it happened. Do you understand? And it was part of my journey to be there. I don't know. Maybe this was not a super clear answer, but
no, absolutely. I love the way you answered that, and I think it's a really good point to bring our conversation to a close here, because that's what the summit is all about: the courage to dream big and to go after our dreams. And if our dreams are big enough, even if we only get halfway there, that's going to be fantastic, right?
Yeah.
And then to focus on inner strength. I think we all. That relationship we have with ourselves is just so important to invest in. The quality of the relationship we have with ourselves is so determinant of everything else in our life. So I just love those two final notes that you ended our conversation with, Stefan. And thank you so much for this. How can people find out more about your work?
Well, they can find on my website, and it's going to be called learntoloveyourwork.com. And there they can find out about the book and a little bit around my coaching services and so forth.
Great. LearnToLoveYourWork.com. And just so I have it straight, is your latest book, is it Neuroleadership or is it Intrinsic Motivation? Or are those the same book?
No. The new book is Intrinsic Motivation. Learn to love your work and succeed as never before.
Great. Neuroleadership was a previous book.
Yes. And that's actually only published in Europe, in Sweden. So
I see. Okay. So Intrinsic Motivation, learn to love your work. And what was the other part of it?
And succeed as never before.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being part of the best year of your life, Stefan. Stefan Falk, a tour de force. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Be well.
Be well.